And welcome back to Life of Posy. In today's video, I want to try something new. A few weeks ago, I went to our local thrift store and looked through the racks of clothes to see if I could find something that I could turn into a dress for Miss Posy. So I found this blue shirt here. It was $4.99. And I thought it had some really fun, lovely detail right here with these ruffly bits on the front. And so I want to see if I can turn this into a dress for Posy. And seeing that the New Year is coming up, I thought it would be fun to sew her a New Year's Eve dress. So stay tuned and follow along. All right, let's get ready. I purchased this shirt in a size large, so I believe there's enough fabric to get our bodice and our skirt out of it because there's a front side and a back side to this shirt. So, first things first is to take our pattern and figure out where we should place it on here in order to leave enough room at the end of the fabric to use for a skirt. I believe that if I just use the plain portion of the fabric for the skirt, the ruffly part will be my top bodice. And I think that I can lay it right here and have these three ruffles going through the center of my bodice. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin it into place. Because I will be cutting through both sides of this shirt, I will have the two pieces of bodice material that I need. And I won't have to use any other fabric. It's a little bit bulky because of these ruffles. I hope that this won't cause an issue during the cutting or sewing, but we're gonna give it a go. That looks pretty good to me. So now I will cut it out. Okay. I cut out both pieces of the bodice here, front and back, and so we will move our pattern aside. Not gonna lie, that was a little bit difficult to cut through these very thick ruffles, but I did it. So let's move on to the next step. Because this already has all the detail I want on the front, I don't need to add anything extra. So all we have to do now is put the good sides together. So we will leave the front of the bodice here, and take the back of the bodice, flip it upside down, and lay it on top of the front. So now the good sides are facing each other. And we will pin this all into place. Now that I'm all clipped into place, I'm going to bring it over to my sewing machine and sew it from this end all the way around to this end. We will not sew the bottom portion. This is to remain opened. Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, as you can see, we have stitched all the way around the bodice, leaving the bottom portion open. I used yellow thread in hopes that you could see it a little bit better. And also it won't show in the finished product because it'll be on the inside. So now we can take our corners, cut those off without cutting into our stitching. This will remove a little extra bulk. I'm actually going to cut a little fabric at the top too because I had some extra. And go ahead and remove any bulk that's in the curves, such as the neckline and the arm bins here. This fabric is very soft and silky, so I don't think it should cause much of an issue. So I'm just going to do it in those few little areas. So now that we've done that, we can flip this right side out. Okay, there we have it. We have sewed the top portion of our bodice. This is a kind of silky material, so it did slip around a little bit as I was sewing it. Just want to note that because when you're choosing your material, that might be something to keep in mind. Silkier materials are harder to sew with, but it all worked out in the end. So now we will move on to attaching our skirt. I still have this portion of the fabric left over from the shirt. I cut the bottom half off, so this should be plenty for my skirt. So I'm gonna go ahead and unbutton this portion because this was a button-up shirt. And this leaves me quite a bit to work with. In fact, let's see, this is about 44 inches in length this way. So I can make a really gathered skirt, which I think will be really cute. And as you can see, this shirt, if we turn it inside out, has been pleated together. Little darts have been put in it, but I'm okay with that being left in the skirt. I think it'll be just fine. So if you refer back to the video where I showed you how to make a pattern for your dog dress and how to figure out the measurements for your skirt, that will help you to do this next portion. I already know that I want Posy's skirt to be 5 inches in length. So I can measure up and see that I have plenty of material here. Normally you would allow an extra 1/2 inch at the bottom and at the top for seam allowance, but this has already been hemmed for us. So there is a really cool bonus about using something like a shirt or a skirt that's already been sewn. They have already done part of the work for you. So I don't even have to hem it. I just have to worry about the little extra 1/2 inch at the top that's going to attach into our bodice. So normally I would cut it out to 6 inches, but because I already have that done, I'm gonna do about 5.5 inches instead. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the whole length of this at 5.5 inches. Okay, I have this all cut out. I've got it at 5.5 inches, and I have this long length to work with that I will gather up. A good rule of thumb, if you're not sure what you wanna do with your skirt, is to take your bodice and measure across. This is 20 inches, so I would double that to 40 inches. And I would cut out a strip 40 inches long by how long you want the skirt to be on the dog's body. So for my dog, 5 inches. Okay, so let's move along and gather our skirt up. At this point, since I have my big long strip of fabric, I'm gonna take it over to my sewing machine. There's a little button here, so I'm gonna take a seam ripper to remove that. But because I'm already hemmed on the side and the bottom, I don't have to do that. So all I have to do is gather this skirt. So I am gonna take it to my sewing machine and run a long top stitch all the way across the top of this, very close to the raw edge. And I'm gonna do it with the largest stitch size on my sewing machine. And I'm going to be sure not to back stitch at the beginning or the end because we don't want a knot here. That way we can pull the thread to gather the skirt. Okay, I'll be right back. So I mentioned before that this fabric is a little bit hard to work with because it's so silky, but it turns out when you're going to gather your skirt on your sewing machine, it works really well if you set your tension to the highest number. The tension on my machine at the highest setting is 9. I put it to 9, I put my stitch size to the biggest stitch, and I just ran it through and it automatically gathered the whole skirt. So I'm loving that. Of course, I left the extra thread at the end and the beginning. And if I need to gather it more, I can separate these strings, my black one to the front, my yellow one to the back, and pull just one string and tug the fabric along in order to gather it. I have other videos on my channel that show you how to do this in more detail, but I'm pretty happy with how easy this project is turning out to be. So next, I'm going to grab my bodice. In order to determine if my skirt has been gathered enough, I like to have it reach this point to this point. So the end of the straps, one point to the next. So I hold this up, and by some miracle, this is exactly where I want it to be. So the next step is to pin it into place. In order to pin the skirt to the bodice, we need to open the bodice up and take the back panel of the bodice and push it way far up so that this portion will not get caught to the back of the bodice. Then we take our skirt and we flip the skirt, good side facing up. We take the bottom and flop it up on top of our bodice. So now the good sides are facing each other. And this ruffly end down here, we are gonna pin to our bodice. So I usually like to find the bottom of the bodice in the center and pin that into place first. So I grab here, and I'm gonna use my clips, but you could use pins. And I attach it all the way along until this last end piece is right at the edge of the strap. And do the same to the other side. So now that I have this all pinned into place, I'm going to start on this end and sew all the way across the length until I reach the other end of the skirt. And I'm going to do it as close to the edge, being sure to catch both the bodice and the skirt in the seam. But remember, keep the back portion of the bodice out of the way. All right, I'm back and I've stitched all the way across, catching both layers of the skirt, both the layer of the skirt and the bodice in here, and I'm going to flip it back over. And that looks really lovely. Just hangs perfectly. So if I flip this to the back side, we are now going to take this portion of the bodice, the back, tuck it one time and fold it over this ruffly bit, this rough edge of the skirt. This is gonna conceal it all. After you get it folded under one time and over the rough edge of the skirt, pin it in place, and do this down the length of the skirt. Once you have this all pinned into place, we'll work on the side straps. What I like to do is take this little end and fold it under a bit with my fingers, and it automatically makes the fabric want to curl in on itself. And make sure everything's tucked in, all those raw edges are tucked in. And then you can take a pin or a clip and clip it into place and work your way down. Again, this fabric is going to start being a little more difficult for me. The skirt was awesome, but working with the bodice is a little tricky. It's slipping and sliding on me, but it's doable. I'm going to try a pin. Okay, now that I'm completely pinned up, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and start at one end and sew all the way across, as close to the edge as I can get while catching both sides of the material. Unfortunately, I lost some footage, but between here and the next scene, I am showing you what I'm going to use to attach to the waistband. It is another piece of that ruffle from the shirt that I tore off and attached to the center waistline to cover up all the rough seams, and adding the Velcro. Okay, there we have it. I was able to put the ruffle on the waistband and get all of the Velcro on. Next, let's just try it on our sweet Posy. Okay, here's little Miss Posy. Let's slip this on. How cute is that? I think that's going to be lovely for our New Year's Eve party.